The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Most leaders are sitting on untapped human energy, and I help them unlock it. I'm an organizational psychologist, logotherapist, workforce advisor, and the founder of the Gusto Now movement. But the title that I really love is much simpler. I traffic in energy. That's my jam. Not the surface level motivation or another employee engagement initiative, but the deeper force, what I call gusto, the life force of performance that drives commitment, perseverance, and genuine ownership of a shared mission in the clients we serve. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, elisecortez.com. Getting into today's program, we have with us Alexandra Levit. She's the founder and CEO of Inspiration at Work, a woman-owned futurist consulting business with the goal of preparing organizations and their employees to be competitive and marketable in the future business world. She's the author of several books, with her latest one co-authored called Make School Work, Solving the American Youth Employment Crisis Through Work-Based Learning, and it's out now. We'll be talking today about the widespread problem of preparing youth for the workforce, how necessary upskilling is spearheading the direction of education, and the approach she and her co-authors advocate for solving the early workforce preparation problem. She joins us today from Chicago. Alexandra, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thanks so much, Elise. It's great to be here.
Isn't it great to be hanging out together?
Absolutely.
Well, let's celebrate this beautiful thing you brought into the world here. I love to be able to show this. I'm one of those people who still likes reading actual physical books, and I use them to decorate my house. So thank you for the decoration.
You're welcome. Hope you enjoy what's inside as well.
I did, which we're going to talk about. So let's just first, since I know quite a bit about you, having read your book and, of course, looking at your website and your LinkedIn, but our listeners and viewers don't. So if you could just start by introducing yourself and help us understand why you're so committed to helping young people enter the workforce prepared to work and earn a sustainable living wage.
Sure. Well, first of all, I like to explain what a workforce futurist is, because most people are shaking their heads and saying, I've never heard of that job title. Mm-hmm. Well, just like the advice that I give others, I've morphed and pivoted with my own job title over years as I've determined what clients are looking for as a consultant. And I became a workforce futurist kind of informally as a result of a book that I wrote now over 20 years ago called They Don't Teach Corporate in College. And when the book came out, I was really just this 27-year-old kid myself who I had a story of being a high achieving student and going out into the business world and failing in my first several jobs and going to the Dale Carnegie course and having a light bulb go off and say, someone should really tell other 20-somethings what they need to do to be successful. And I'm like, I can be that person. So I wrote the book and really just intended it to be a side project. But I, over time, started getting asked by HR teams in particular if they could advise on the future of this new crop of 20-somethings in town called the millennials. The millennials were making a huge splash at the time, and we didn't really know what to do with them. We had never seen the types of behaviors that they exhibited before. And so I was forced into a position of having to forecast what I thought the millennials would be like as they grew into their careers and as leaders. And at first, that was just a bunch of quantitative research, just talking and surveying a ton of people. But over time, I learned the method to the madness of the practice of strategic foresight. And over time, I have gotten a little bit better at the scientific practice of this and doing it in a more formal way, as you might say. And it's been a ton of fun. The only way to know if you're any good as a futurist is to wait. And so it has been highly entertaining to see my forecasts that have come true and have not come true over the years. And for those of you who are, again, still pondering the term futurist, it really just means somebody who looks at trends that are coming up through whatever environment you're in. So in my world, it's the business world, and tries to make an educated determination based on signals about what has the potential for disruption. And so we look at the education to work transition as being ripe for disruption and being one of those sticky, thorny problems that especially we here in the US are dealing with. It is a global phenomenon, but I think it's a little bit worse here in the sense that we have all of these new college graduates, very talented young people, and we simply, for a variety of reasons, do not have the jobs for them right now. And so we see stagnancy in the career launch of these young people. And so is there a better way? We think there is. And so when I met the folks at GPS Education Partners that were making a real difference in the Midwest, trying to provide really high quality work-based learning to high school students so they could then make a good decision about whether a four-year college was the right next step for them. And it's been a journey. It's been a lot of fun. And I look forward to telling you all about it.
Thank you. That was beautiful. It's wonderful to see your passion. And I want more people to be able to lean into their passion. And that's something I want to get to in just a second. But before we do, let's just sort of situate, there's a real disconnect here. We have young people who are coming out of high school or maybe even finishing college, and they need to land their first job, and they don't have the experience or the skills to do that. And at the same time, the U.S. labor shortage sits at 70%, you say in your book, which is 5 points below the global average. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is that 7 in 10 employers are unable to find suitable workers for their job vacancies. I mean, this is just a crazy mismatch here.
Yeah. And this has been the case for quite some time. People like to blame it on AI and say, well, AI is the reason that college grads don't have jobs anymore. But we have always seen this gap between the positions that are available to be filled and the individuals who are ready and willing to take those positions. Here in the US, that's been a problem since I got into the space 20 years ago. And so it's only becoming more urgent, but it's not a particularly new problem, unfortunately. It's one we haven't solved, but that's what we're here to do with Make School Work. We hope that we're posing one realistic and really practical solution to this quandary that we've been facing.
I really appreciated the foreword by Jean Eddy, who is the executive chair of the American Student Assistance. I love that she talked about the idea of helping students find their ikigai. I've had ikigai authors on my show before, and I was so delighted that showed up in the book. And so for those of you who don't know what ikigai is, it's a Japanese concept, and it really speaks to it kind of means something like what makes for a good life, right? And so I love that, she's mentioning here, she says that helping more young people, they deserve to find their ikigai, she says, that intersection of what they are good at, what they can be paid for, what the world needs, and there it is, their passion. So I really appreciate this idea that you're trying to, right out of the gate, help youth do that. So they don't come to us or to me when they're 40s and 50s and they just, hate their life and hate their job and wonder why they made this choice. Yeah. So I wanted to celebrate that. And if you want to speak a little bit more of the spirit of what the GPS is trying to do with this regard, and we'll get more into, the mechanics of it later, but at least let's start with how they're trying to help.
Yeah, I think the critical thing is that we're providing, or not me, but the GPS Education Partner programs are providing young people with information and choices. So when I was going through school, really there was only one choice given to me, and that was get good enough grades and do well enough that you will go to a good 4-year college. Once I got into the 4-year college, really nobody thought much about what I was going to do after that. And it was up to me to figure out, okay, I have all this education now. How am I going to translate that into something that is actually marketable and will actually pay me a living wage? And now we see that the opportunities exist with employers facing increasing labor shortages, as you mentioned, to bring in high school students who are not just doing a job shadowing and not just doing a tour of the facility, but are actually working as entry-level professionals and apprentices on, let's say, a manufacturing shop floor. And they're doing this for a period of time so that they actually become an integrated part of that employer's team, which provides us all sorts of benefits. It provides the student with information and experience. Maybe they loved it and maybe they didn't. And the information that they got about what they don't like is just as important as the information about what they do like. So that's still a valuable experience. And they get that information. They also learn a lot more about how to work, which is not a skill that you just get. I mean, my own story is proof of that. My goodness, it took me 5 years to get it together and figure out the professional human skills that were necessary to be successful. And when you are working as a 16 or 17-year-old high school student in a professional environment, you start to learn even really basic things, Elise. Like, if I don't show up for a gig on time, or I don't show up for my job on time, I'm not just affecting myself,
right?
I'm affecting my entire team, and my team has families to support. Right. So every time I let them down, there are real world consequences to that. Mm-hmm. And that is something that just most teenagers do not get exposure to. So by the time they graduate, they really are in a position to make a decision. Can I continue to work? Do I like this job? Do I like this industry? Do I see it as something I could continue to pursue and move up in? And if so, does my employer think I need additional education right now? And if they do, is it something they might help me pay for? So you get a little bit out of the debt situation that a lot of students find themselves in. Or they might decide, okay, well, now I'm going to go to a four-year college, but I'm much more targeted in what I want to do there. And I know how that college education is going to translate into a job when I get out. And so I think those are the values that are provided to the students. And another thing that we see a lot and we don't really think about or talk about is the positive impact on the employees themselves who are working in an environment where an opportunity for mentorship can be golden. For people who maybe they feel stagnant in the job, maybe they feel like there's nothing more to learn or nothing more to teach, maybe they're worried about AI, they could have all types of things going through their minds. But here's a young person who can really benefit from your expertise and you can really take under your wing. And we see that has an enormous impact on employee engagement and job satisfaction in existing employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I appreciate too, even just still in the forward, just talking about there are so many ways to be able to educate, help prepare these youth for working apprenticeships, internships, competency-based programs. I love the stackable macro credentials, STEM camps, community learning. You know, for me, as I read the book, you reminded me that for me, I grew up in a small town in northeastern Oregon. When I graduated high school, Alexandra, the population was 4,800. And I had one single ambition, and that was to get the heck out of there. Yeah. And so I got a co-op job in my senior year of high school. And I was just answering phones in this pumping company. But the owner would call in from Portland, and he thought he liked my work ethic and the way that I interacted on the phone. And he said this magical phrase to me one day. He said, "If you ever find yourself in Portland, you've got a job with me." And that was my first job. That's how it happened. And I just shudder to think how I would have flailed if I didn't have that kind of conduit and that kind of preparation.
And that's the beauty of work-based learning. I mean, you essentially did a work-based learning assignment. Yes. You established a relationship. You learned enough about it so that you could hit the ground running, come on board right away, and not need as much of a training period. And that's how we hope this will work. And of course, we can't promise every single person who goes through a work-based learning program is going to end up working at the company. It's not the only solution to your pipeline issues. But I think what it does do in the community that you're in is it fosters this sense of, yes, we are going to take care of our own. We are going to look at the high school students in their area. And if they don't necessarily end up working for us, like they'll still be working in our community and helping our community have the jobs filled that they need so that companies don't have to leave the community to go somewhere else because they don't have enough people, which we see happening a lot.
Well, and as you say in the book, all of this really hinges on this idea of public-private educational collaboration, and that's expanding. So if you could speak a little bit to that, this whole 3P sort of approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky. And that is the one thing that we say about work-based learning, especially what we deem high quality work-based learning. It's not a particularly easy thing to do. And because of exactly what you're talking about, we do require, in order to start one of these programs from scratch, there are a lot of stakeholders that are involved in the education of young people. So of course you have the individual school districts and the individual schools. You have public policy advocates. So this could be a nonprofit organization or even a government organization. And you have the employers. And so there are a lot of different parts here that may come to the table with agendas that don't exactly match up and objectives that might be slightly different. And so the role of an effective work-based learning, we call it a convener, is to gather all of these people in the same room, determine what are the similarities and differences in what they're trying to achieve, and develop a partnership that is truly a win-win for everyone. And I think that it is tough, and we don't like to tell people that this is an easy thing to do, but it is doable. And as we said, this is a space that is ripe for disruption. So it's not like everyone in these organizations and schools and companies is being like, yeah, our system works just fine as it is. Everybody recognizes that the system is fundamentally broken and we have to do something to change it. So the goal is, all right, if we want to get people to change, how do we get them to do that change in the most palatable, easy way possible? And that's what we try to do when we bring everyone together for a work-based learning program.
Beautiful, Alexandra. Let our listeners and viewers dwell on what we've been talking about so far. We've been talking about the widespread problem of preparing youth for the workforce. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on air with Alexandra Levit, who's the founder and CEO of Inspiration at Work, a woman-owned futurist consulting business with the goal of preparing organizations and their employees to be competitive and marketable in the future business world. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about how necessary upskilling is spearheading the direction of education. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I'm dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because their people thrive, are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand today's workforce. What do they want and need to stick around and give you their best? And then I provide you 22 best practices for you to be able to elevate your leadership and your culture to keep them. You can find all my books on Amazon or also my personal site, elisecortez.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Alexandra Levit. She's the author of Make School Work, Solving the American Youth Employment Crisis Through Work-Based Learning. Co-author, I should say, because there's two other authors as well. So now that we're talking in this segment about how necessary upskilling is spearheading the direction of education, we already said in the last segment how four-year degrees are starting to lose their luster. You say that very, very, very directly in your book. And you talk about the appeal of micro-credentials, and you yourself have done that. And you say here in the book that according to Coursera, 90% of students believe earning a micro-credential can help them secure a job after graduation, and 80% of employers believe professional certificates strengthen job application. So there's some real meat to this here.
Yeah, and this is one of those trends where, I mean, I told you, Lisa, I'm always honest about where I get things wrong and when I get them right. And this is one of those things that I would have expected to take off a lot more quickly than it did, meaning micro-credentials, because it just makes logical sense that in a world that's getting increasingly more complex, where one shot at education at the very beginning of your life doesn't really prepare you with all of the skills you might need to have a career in different parts of history, really. I mean, if you think about if you have a 50, 60-year career, that's a really long time. And a lot of things change during that period. And so to say that you would be done with education at the very beginning and that you would never need to learn anything else is a little bit, it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And so the idea that you could be working in an industry or working in a function and you say, hey, I think I need some additional skills, for example, in data analytics. Well, you don't need to go back to a 4-year degree to get a PhD or a master's in data analytics unless that's your core job. But if you just need that as just something that's in your back pocket or something that's a nice adjacent skill for what you are doing, then getting a micro-credential in that is highly efficient and effective. It's a lot of times done online. They're either free or low cost. They're accessible to the average person. And so what we really need to see, though, with micro-credentials is some kind of standardization, because I think there are outlets that are sort of universally respected, but there's a lot more courses out there when you're just kind of like, I don't know who's creating this content, who's vetting this content, and I'm not sure if I should, if I'm an employer, accept the micro-credential, or if I'm just going to rest on my laurels and see if they have a degree or not in the area of question. But it should, in theory, be something that is highly beneficial to everyone involved, because you can really skill up much more quickly doing it through a micro-credential or certification program than you could if you decide every time you need a new skill that you're going to go back for an additional degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. So you already touched on this here, Alexandra, but I want to go back to it here because you talked about, well, first, let me situate. One of the many things I like about your book is I love the case studies. So this isn't just an academic read. You're sharing real world examples, and I want to get to one here later with IBM of how they're putting these work-based learning programs to work. And so we really get to a feel for, we could do that kind of thing. So one of the things I appreciated, you have a section in your book where a gentleman named Mike Irwin, who's a retired CEO at Tailored Label Products, commented that today's students need a structured, tangible way to evaluate career options, and that being on the site alongside working adults and facing real world rewards of consequences matures kids in a way nothing else can. And I completely agree with that. I'm so grateful my parents made me work for them in their restaurant when I was 14 years old. And nothing could replace that kind of learning.
Yeah. And you know, we're seeing with our young people today, and I have 2 teenagers, so I'm getting this firsthand, they don't work. And it's not necessarily that they don't want to work. It's just, it's not pushed. It's not really facilitated. There's a higher barrier to entry in the world of traditional teenage employment. And then you have people who are not teenagers who have to take traditional teenage employment because they don't have anything else. And so the result of all that is that our young people are not working at all as much as they used to. And this really widens the gap even further as to whether or not they are ready to go to work when they graduate from school. Because a lot of times they haven't even had the experience of having an internship or having a retail job or a hospitality job. The things that we used to take for granted, a lot of young people are not given access to them. And so they're really flying blind. And the folks at GPS said, no, I love to tell the story of my own son, because I feel like this crystallizes the point of work-based learning more than anything, at least in my life currently. And he is all of his life thought he wanted to be an aerospace engineer. And he just thought it was cool to build spaceships and build rockets. And we had no way of determining what the actual work of an entry-level aerospace engineer is. So essentially we were going to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a 4-year degree, and we have no context for whether my son will actually like the work or not. Yeah. So it's extraordinarily risky. Where I have to be honest, I haven't had access to a work-based learning program for him here in the city of Chicago, but we did do a nice job shadow with the folks at MXD. And at MXD, my son learned in pretty much the first 10 minutes that as an entry-level aerospace engineer, you are not building the rocket. You're not even building a section of the rocket. You're not even building a major part of the rocket. You are building a single panel on that rocket. And it was like, whoa, so it's going to be a long time before I'm involved in the entire process. And they're like, not even necessarily. You may never get there unless you're a systems engineer. These are the things that, unless you're there, you're not going to find out. And wouldn't it be nice if my son had had that information prior to deciding on this career path?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, kids are supposed to declare their general direction, in middle school these days. That's just crazy.
Yep.
Okay, so I have to tell you, I was so delighted when I read about these, 3 types of skills that the DeBruce Foundation articulated, which just blew me away. And of course, you know why. But can you share with those 3 different skills and kind of how they're different?
Well, I mean, I think so GPS Ed has their way of defining skills and I have my way of defining skills, and they're mostly aligned. I think when I like to think of skills, I think of things that are tangible, hard skills that are things you can learn from reading a book or taking a course. Computer programming might be an example. We talked about podcast hosting. That is actually an example of a hard skill. It's something that is much more tangible. And then you have more soft interpersonal skills that are associated with how you get along with people and how you make judgments and how you apply your intuition, how you solve problems. And then there are the skills that are sort of uniquely human skills. So, and I'm also talking about when I phrase these, I tend to call them pre-industrial skills, which refers to the skills that we all needed before technology existed. So the skills to just be a person in the world and do so ethically, responsibly, and with an eye toward having the most meaningful life possible. So basically what you were talking about at the very beginning with working on purpose or working with purpose, human skills allow us to do that. So, I mean, for more or less, we're whether we're talking about it in the book in the context of work-based learning or we're talking about it more generally, most people would agree there are buckets of skills. And I also love the part of the book where we talk about durable skills, because to me, that's a little bit of a different dimension in the sense of, I think skills in all 3 areas could be classified or not classified as durable skills. It just depends on what they are. But durable skills are those that you will need in a variety of different occupations, in a variety of different scenarios or roles. And because we have to become as broadly skilled as we can in a world where we don't know what career we're going to have next, those durable skills have increasing importance. We used to call them transferable skills. It's pretty much just the same thing as that. But I think it's important that when we look across the dimension of hard, soft, and human skills, we consider their durability, because there are areas in all 3 where skills are more durable than others.
Well, of course, I picked up on that because, the durable, in the book they're referencing what used to be called soft skills or self-actualization skills. And so much of that is what we've been doing for our leadership development programs and our culture work, et cetera, and totally what we evangelize in the Gusto Now movement, which is really about doubling down on humanity in the age of AI, helping people to learn how to more deeply understand and live and use their emotions, to be able to increase their effectiveness in being able to relate to other people, customers, fellow coworkers, et cetera. All those kinds of things.
You're living the work right there.
I am. Yes, that's it. So we're champions of this stuff. So I was just, I remember when I first got into the field and I was, really focused on more of those soft skills, and people were like, oh, woo-woo soft. And now, of course, they're durable. So anyway, it just made me giggle. Okay, so just if we could briefly, I want to, if I can, have you situate. You have lots of those case studies and spotlights in the book, and there was just one about how IBM helped launch students immediately into the technology workforce. If you could say a little bit about that, you don't have to go into great detail, but it'll help us color it.
So IBM was one of the first, I think I can fairly confidently say that they were one of the first big Fortune 500 companies to invest in young people through boot camps. So essentially having young people come to IBM or do something that IBM has created in order to gain a specific skill set so that they would be better prepared for digital careers in particular. And what I love about IBM's work is it's not all self-serving. They really do look at that community aspect that I talked about a few minutes ago, that by making young people aware and skilled to go into technology careers in their community, it really benefits everyone. And I also like the age groups that IBM has worked with. I mean, they've started pretty young in getting middle schoolers and high schoolers interested in this by letting them try the work hands-on, so they can actually see, is this something I could see myself doing for 8 hours a day every day. And I really admire them because, again, they were one of the first. They put their neck out to do something that not a lot of companies were doing. And frankly, it's that companies don't want to invest in programs like that. And that one was a lot broader than just having a single work-based learning initiative. But it was a huge investment. And I think giving them credit for that is important because it's something that has helped all of us in this quest to promote more work-based learning.
Mm-hmm. That's, a big part of what we evangelize in this program, and in my own work, business can be such a force for good in the world, when it's really directed here. And we have such an opportunity to partner, as you say in the book, with public organizations, public agencies to be able to bring about these necessary changes. So all that to say, thanks for writing the book. Amazing. Let's grab our next break here. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Alexandra Levit. She's the founder and CEO of Inspiration Network, which is a woman-owned futurist consulting business with the goal of preparing organizations and their employees to be competitive and marketable in the future business world. In this last segment, we were talking about how necessary upskilling is spearheading the direction of education. In the last segment here, we're going to talk about the specific work that GPS Education Partners is doing to solve this early workforce preparation problem. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As you know by now, my program is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you along your journey to realize more of your potential. I mentioned my last book, The Great Revitalization, in the last segment there. What I did is that contains 22 best practices to help you elevate the culture of your organization for today's discerning workforce. I created a simple 3-page assessment that you can download from my site. It's free to help you ascertain the extent to which you are meeting those standards. You can find it at gusto-now.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Alexandra Levit. She's the author or co-author of Make School Work, Solving the American Youth Employment Crisis Through Work-Based Learning. So I want to do a little bit of justice to the work that GPS is doing. And I know this, maybe you can't speak to this as deeply as they can directly themselves, but I know you can give it some justice here. So if we could start with this notion here, you say in the book that all definitions of work-based learning involve providing a work-aligned experience as part of one's education to prepare for a potential career. Mm-hmm. But any of those experiences can be positioned on a continuum based on 3 variables: purpose, intensity, and immersiveness. Can you speak to a little bit about what that means?
Well, I think one of the things that my colleague, Steph Locke, always says is we're not aiming for random acts of work-based learning, which is what my son essentially did when he did, a couple of hours job shadowing to find out, how aerospace engineering really worked. And I think when we talk about work-based learning in the context of the programs that GPS Education Partners offers, we are talking about high-quality work-based learning. So there's a method to the madness. That's the purpose, where we know why we're doing this. Why are we interested in this particular opportunity? What are we hoping to learn from it? So we have really concrete goals. And how is the opportunity going to be structured? So are you going to go there 3 days a week? How is it going to fit into your school day? How long is it going to go for? What are your specific responsibilities going to be? So you've really bound it around fairly tight parameters so that when you go and do the experience, you know pretty much exactly what you're going to be doing and what you're going to get out of it. And then immersiveness is my personal favorite, in the sense that I think just being on site, for example, on a shop floor, in an office, and seeing day in and day out what people do to get work done? What does the process look like? What are the workflows? What are the technologies that are coming into, for example, a manufacturing environment? Nobody has familiarity with a lot of these robotics technologies. But if you're a young person who's literally there when the technology is being brought in, you learn to do your job in service of that technology or leveraging that technology. And then you grow up alongside it. As you acquire more skills, then you learn the next stage of dealing with that technology. And so I think immersiveness really refers to the fact that you have the opportunity to be up there, up close, and understanding exactly what's going on and what the business is going to need. And you're actively contributing to a solution as opposed to just being an observer, which a lot of programs that are geared toward young people, we allow them to look at what we're doing, but they don't actively participate. And I think high quality work-based learning, one of the very important things that it does is it allows young people to be in it to an extent that they really do understand what it would be like to have an entry-level role in this field.
Awesome. Helps, I think, our listeners and viewers start to get their head around how could we make this work for our organization. And then building on that, you also say in the book that high quality work-based learning programs focus on what you call the 4 A's: authenticity, aspiration, ability, and agency. If you could speak a bit to those.
Yeah, I mean, this is another way that we define high quality work-based learning. And authenticity is really something the student wants to do, the employer wants to have the student. So it's an authentic learning experience from the perspective of everyone is doing this for a specific purpose, and we hope to be true to ourselves in that purpose. Agility really just encourages students to try different things and to understand that what they pick might not be the be-all, end-all of career satisfaction, but that it's important because it allows them to learn those durable skills that will make it easier for them to work in general in the purpose. In the future business world or in a manufacturing setting, whatever they would choose. Aspiration helps them decide what their next steps are. And a lot of times, as I was saying a few minutes ago, if you have not tried things, you don't know what you don't like or what you do like. So it's very important to give young people the process of trying different things and understanding that at the end of the day, they do want to earn a living wage and they want to have a career that they feel at least a little bit of passion for. So that's the aspiration. And I missed one. Let's see, I did.
Did you agency?
Agency. Yeah. So, I mean, agency just fits really well with the other ones in the sense of the students in charge of their own destiny. It gives them the opportunity to say, this is for me or this is not for me. And we don't just tell them, okay, there's one path to a 4-year university and you better take it or else. We are saying, maybe that is for you and maybe that isn't, but here are a whole bunch of options. You have the agency to decide what happens next, and you have the ability to make the most of this opportunity so that it gives you as much knowledge and background skills as possible moving forward.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay, now let's celebrate another case study that you have in your book. There were so many to choose from, but I really appreciated the Johnson Controls one that you situated that was all about giving back while also combating the HVAC labor shortage, and at the same time being able to gain recruiting competitive advantage by cultivating that youth. That was just so smart to me.
It's so smart to me too. At least I don't understand. Again, this goes back to the very beginning. Why, to me, this is a no-brainer. Why would you not take this low-hanging fruit when you're having such trouble staffing your positions? And I think it really comes down to the pain hasn't gotten great enough yet. Okay. As a futurist, I look at demographic trends quite a bit. And what we see is that pretty much globally, there's a few countries where this is an exception, but globally, we are losing population. There are not going to be enough young people available to work the jobs that we currently have. And there's a lot of discussion around AI might replace people in certain jobs. To date, that has not happened, but the projected labor shortage is still happening. So we need a solution that is not just, well, we can expect that we won't need as many people because AI will take over everything. So that's not good enough. And so organizations that are saying, look, I've got a perfectly healthy pipeline of young people right here in my community who I can put to work and train them to go into these roles. And then I can stop worrying so much about the sources. Where am I going to get these people? How am I going to compete with big companies that have massive brand names in a space. I mean, that's something a lot of small to medium companies deal with. And it's like, you don't have to do that. You can provide the experience that gets a student to your organization first. And if they're not working for your organization in the long run, maybe one of their relatives or friends is. It really does build that presence of an organization within the community that, in an ideal world, it wants to stay in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I want to finish really with the idea here. You say in the very last page of your book, really, is your ultimate goal in sharing the ideas in the book is to catalyze systemic change and how America prepares its young people for success. Boy, talk about doing something with your one precious life. I think that's so fantastic. So if you could say a little bit more about just the whole spirit of why you wrote the book and what it is that you're trying to accomplish with it.
Well, I was so delighted when I met the folks at GPS Ed, because I have been looking for a solution to this for the last 20 years, in the sense of I talk with companies all the time that are thinking of moving out of their area, their state, or their community because they can't get enough people. And then we see this early entry level hiring crisis happening where there are more young people, more college grads out of the workforce than there have been in recent memory. And so we've got a lot of people looking for work and we've got a lot of jobs. How do we match the two up? And there are technology solutions to this, but I really like the education angle to it, because I think we do spend a lot of education, formal education, teaching people things they don't necessarily need to know. Whereas this, I think, uses the time and the energy and the funds more productively. And so while it's a big mission to change our education system systemically, you have to start somewhere. And I'm hopeful that as a result of this book and all of the wonderful work that GPS Ed is able to expand nationally. And before we know it, you can access work-based learning wherever in the country you might be.
I love that. I love that mission. It's so exciting. And that's the other thing is, of course, people want to be part of something that they can feel great about. They feel extended by being part of that. So it's just such a great thing. I think we'll turn on a lot of listeners and viewers toward that end. Mm-hmm. So in closing here, Alexandra, I think that this show is listened to by people around the world, and they tune in for various reasons, but in part they're tuning in because they want to become a better leader. They want to help create workplaces where people thrive. And they want to be able to create a space where, everybody can learn and contribute. What would you like to leave them with?
I would like to leave them with the idea that this is possible work. It takes creativity, it takes tenaciousness, but anyone in any part of the process, whether you're an educator, whether you're a public policy person, or whether you're an HR person or an employer, you can start with a pilot that is relatively simple to accomplish and grow it over time. This is work that is accessible to everyone. And yes, throughout the globe, there are some areas of the world, Europe being one of them, that are better at this work-based learning thing than others. And so learning from those around us who have done things successfully and figuring out how we can adapt those successes to our own requirements and our own populations.
I am just delighted to hear this. And I really think, I don't want to have a should in here, but I really do think that organizations, we rely on them. We will help power their mission. And in return, we need a livelihood. And there's that partnership, I think, is really, really beautiful. And I hope we've enticed at least a few listeners and viewers to come and join us for this ride.
I hope so too. Thanks, Elise.
I'm so grateful to have met you, Alexandra, to have read your book, to be inspired by it, and to share it with listeners around the world. Thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
My pleasure.
Listeners and viewers, you're going to learn more about Alexandra Levit, the work she does as a futurist consultant at Inspiration at Work, and her books, which include Make School Work. A couple places you can go. You can start it on her personal site, which is alexandralevit.com. Let me spell that for you. So Alexandra, Alexandra, and her last name Levit has just one T, Levit, alexandralevit.com. You can also go to makeschoolwork.org to learn more about the book itself, makeschoolwork.org. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via reported podcast. We were on the air with Ryan Gottfredson, the author of Becoming Better, the groundbreaking science of personal transformation. We talked about the difference between horizontal development and vertical development in leadership development. We dove into the being and doing sides of ourselves, and then talked about some ways people can immediately start the process of vertically developing on their own. Next week, we'll be on the air with Mary Baird, talking about her playful and incredibly jam-packed resource treasure trove book called Squash the Sunday Scaries. a modern playbook to rebuild trust, transform culture, and reignite your workplace. See you then. Let's continue leaning into discovering how to elevate your operating system as a leader and create destination workplaces where legendary business takes place. Let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.